Running Sentences presents A Judge, a Jury, and a Sheriff. Part 2. The Sheriff. Sheriff Wilton finds himself busy with work after the mess at the judge's home. There is plenty of going on and more to worry about for him than he wants to deal with. This is a work of fiction. Any names, characters, events, incidences, and situations within this story are products of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to real people, real situations, and/or real events is purely coincidental. This story is not meant to be realistic whatsoever. Story narrated and written by Michael Honnery. Copyright 2023, Michael Honnery. All rights reserved. Wilton sat back at his desk staring at his old computer screen. It was old, with green text against a black backdrop that looked like it belonged in the 1980s. On it was the information about the judge's latest cases that he'd ruled over. A knock on his door brought in Deputy Carter, followed by a man in a suit, and by the looks of it to Wilton, it was a big-shot agency federal man. "Sir, this is Agent Victor, who would like to hear about our investigation into Judge DePercy." "Thank you, Carter. Please go tend to your duties." He rose from his chair, looking at the man before him tiredly, and signaled that the agent should take a seat. Victor looked at the unfriendly seats that had no cushions to them, and sighed before sitting down. Wilton remained standing, looking down on the man, trying to study him and that all-too-slick look that he had going on. "Sheriff Wilton, it's good to meet you. I understand your department responded to the incident at the judge's house?" "Yes, we did. We had a call of a gunshot in the vicinity of the judge's house, and that there was a lot of them going on. We dispatched our force and called in any local units that could respond, including state officers." That's interesting. I have a report from the state police saying that you didn't call them." "If my officers did not call it in to them, then I will find out about it. But they said they called them in. Is that your only complaint, sir? If so, I figured it would be up to the state cops to come down here and complain to my face. Why are you here? They don't hesitate about complaining to me. So why are you here, sir?" The agent shook his head and gave him a look to say he should know better than that. "We need to hear what you have to say about what happened when you got there and when you left." "Well, sir, that's a rather complicated situation. We arrived, jumped off our airboats, ran into the house with who we had ready for anything and everything, found a dead house filled with bullets and holes, went all the way up to the judge's home office on the second floor. There was a fire going in there, so I ordered the officers to grab the files, since it was already beginning to rage and burn away, and we couldn't get close to it, so we got what we could. We saw the bodies, and we tried to drag them out, but the fire was too much." "So you just left those two bodies alone, even though one of them was close to the cabinet, from what the reports say?" "Well, yes, it was pretty bad. The fire was pretty bad, and if there was one, we couldn't really, we saw, I figured we saw, my officers said they saw a body, and they tried to get to it, but they didn't really mention about how close or far away it was. And there was not much we could do. We weren't the fire department, and even if we were, a fire out on the bayou without a proper tanker boat is close to impossible to put out." "That would be your department's line of report?" "Don't think I don't believe you, but it is a little, doesn't sound very believable. And please don't misunderstand me, that this is our standard line of questioning. We just want to know what you know, so that we can figure out what we know. We want to be on the same page." Wilton eyed the man, not believing him, but nodded affirmatively. There was a nod in reply from him as the agent stood up. "We will be around if you have any questions or anything like that. But if you hear anything or see anything, please contact us." The agent began moving towards the door. "One more thing before you go, sir." Agent Victor stopped at the door, looking over at him. "It would be nice if your agents shared what you have reported upon in this investigation that you had going on with the judge and all of that. We need to know as well as you do. Well, as far as I know, it's the usual when it comes to things like this. Corruption, money laundering, abuse of public office. The standard affair of corruption. It's been going on for a year or so. Things moving at a pace one would expect. I'm not in charge of that investigation now. Thank you. I'm sure you're holding things back, but hey, that's how we all operate, isn't it? They stared at one another for a few seconds before Victor opened the door and exited. Once gone, Wilton's fist slammed down on the desk with a snarl coming to his face. He rose from his chair, thoughts going to all that had gone wrong and the things that still could. He was to the door in a flash. Wilton hurried his way out of the office and to the back door leading to the surplus part of the building. It's where they kept what evidence they'd collected on cases and so on. What was back there never amounted to much, but now they did have a few boxes of the judge's cases stuffed in there. Wilton banged on the door into the evidence room since it was locked, and the only way in was with a key. One he did not have because only the evidence officer was allowed to it by town rules. The officer opened up the door and peered out at him. "Oh, it's you, sir. Come in." The room was well lit, though by heavy fluorescent lights, and was not a pleasant look. It smelled mildewy in here, and all there really was a fold-out table with the boxes now on top of said table. "Are you going through the evidence yet?" "Haven't had time to, sir. Is it a pressing matter?" "The state cops and the government cops are going to want to look at what we have saved from that file. We need to know what they contain before they get a sniff at it. Yeah, and so yes, it is rather pressing, as are most investigations." "Well, sir, we only have me, so it's going to take some time for me to get through this." "I am here, Carl, and since it is a quiet town, I guess I will help you out. Is that all right?" You helping out for once, sir? Unlike all the other times you've been around?" "I take offense to that, but there is little time to argue about this and make nasty remarks to one another. So let us investigate, shall we, Carl?" Wilton had already made his way towards the table and came to a stop next to the box closest to him and flicked the lid off of it with his hand. He then plunged his hand, taking out a bunch of files, and then took a step away to find some place to sit. There was none, and since there was none, he sat on the ground as he prepared to look over these. He didn't get far when he noticed that the evidence room officer, Carl, was still standing there, door still slightly opened and not doing much. "What are you doing? We have work, Carl." "It's just such a surprise, sir. I didn't expect you were being serious about it." "Well, I am. Now, we have work." The officer nodded and closed the door and made sure it was locked as he made his way slowly over to the open box and took out a few files for himself. After a second of looking around, he jumped up onto the table to sit. Wilton watched to make sure he was working before he lowered his own eyes to examine the paperwork. File after file went by, each of them detailing a case where a person found themselves in debt and had to pay it off to a collection company. But they would miss a payment, and then that person wound up in front of the court and had a fine and forced payment put upon them. All of them read in the same manner, and by the time he had finished, Wilton wanted to rub his tired eyes. He did so, but got up, dumping the files back into their boxes as he headed for the door. The other cops, the federal and state people will probably be around and poking around in a while. Just make sure you know what's in these files, and if you could write up a quick summary. You know the usual sort of thing, lots of files on debt collection and so on. If they want to see the files for themselves, fine, but they aren't to leave the office unless under a judge's orders, understood? With that said, he walked out of the evidence room, but glanced around it one last time as he left. Wilton was soon back in the office part of the station, which also doubled as a bit of a lobby, and moved for the door to exit. "Are you going out, sir?" I have a meeting with some important officials since things have changed around here rather suddenly. We have no judge for the area anymore, for one thing, and the local mayors won't have that one bit, will they?" His fellow officer wanted to say more, but Wilton pulled on the door handle as he opened it, and slammed it shut when he made his way out. A few short steps from the station and onto the main road through town put Wilton at his cop car. He fished out his keys and unlocked the door to the old SUV, which had seen better days. It still ran, mostly fine, but it also complained at the slightest bit of movement. He stared at the files on the passenger side of the car and sighed. "Those need to vanish rather quickly, but I can't be late." He took a moment before leaning in and grabbing them and heading them to the back of his vehicle. The trunk popped open, and once it was fully opened, he gently lifted the floor mat to reveal the emergency tire well. There was the spot where the spare tire should be, but it wasn't, and he dropped the files in there instead. Then carefully set the mat back in place so it looked like nothing was wrong. Job done, he got the trunk closed and got into the car, and got going. The drive to the meeting place of the local mayors and sheriffs took a bit of the afternoon, but he eventually got to the private club, Gloves Grove, and found the parking lot already busy with a few cars. No doubt the local mayors and a variety of town cop cars said he was running a bit late. Wilton wasted no time finding a parking space and getting out of his vehicle to head to the front entrance of this place, only to find that Sheriff Bartley was nearby, near the door, smoking a heavy cigar and taking in the sunny day. Wilton did not like this man who was going to be vying for a chance to be the new judge. Too many bad stories and a cowboy attitude of do what he wanted to for Wilton's taste. Unfortunately, the man stepped in the way, blocking off the front door as he approached. "Mr. Sheriff Wilton, it has been a long time since we last got together and had a chat." "You keep that distance because you hate me, and said so to my face the last time." "Did I now? Well, I guess I should make amends to you then. I'm deeply sorry if I offended you." "I'll doubt that, and if you're trying to convince me that I should nominate you, I have the idea to nominate myself for the newly vacated position." Sheriff Bartley scowled at him, but didn't move out of the way. "You're a terrible idea, sir, on your part if you go through with it. There are only two people who have a chance now that the old corrupt bones is gone. One of them is me, and the other's Mare Carroll, and she will only make matters complicated if she wins. It's best if I win." "I will keep that in mind, sir, and steal away votes from you two, because let's face it, no one wants to vote for you radicals if they can avoid it or if they themselves are radicals. Please move aside." "I'm warning you, don't interfere with my election. I know far more than I will ever tell you." Wilton shook his head no, and pushed past the man so that he could finally enter. The lobby of this fancy club was dark thanks to the dimly lit lamps about the place. Music was blaring in the background, but not the typical dance club stuff. It was a bit more mature here, as tunes lulled their way through the air, giving an exotic feeling as single dancers danced up on a stage that might appreciate such music. He approached the counter that was the coat check-in room, and the security guard holding firm at his station was there to greet him. "Oh, hey there, Sheriff Wilton. It's been a bit since you've been around, and you last graced us at Gloves Grove. You find you're going in a new direction, or the fine ladies here are, rather sad you weren't around much." "I've been busy with work, Mr. Derrick. The meeting is in the usual space. A VIP section reserved for your group. You got a lot of important people out here this time. A dead judge or a chance to improve one's standing in the area will bring out everybody." "Oh, I see, Mr. Sheriff. Well, go right on through, but please do leave your weapon here." Wilton had already unholstered his pistol and plopped it onto the desk. It was swept away from sight by the security guard, who offered a ticket in return. The sheriff grabbed it and turned his right to head to the door that said club. There were a few customers watching the stage area where a burlesque show was going on to classical music. Wilton stopped for a second to take in the dancer, and then, once he'd seen enough, made his way through the place towards the stairs where the VIP section was hidden away. Another security officer guarded this area, but upon seeing him, stepped aside, letting him in. A noisy table filled with the local mayors and sheriffs greeted him. There was already an argument ongoing about something, but he couldn't tell what it was. Wilton was at first kept near the door, looking to see who he recognized and who he didn't. They were all the usual lot of unhappy and overworked people, and no new faces. "Well, Sheriff Wilton, the whole gang is almost here except for the newbie. Our terrible associate Bartley out there. Yeah, but no one cares about him since he's trying to get elected as president of our little club, and as the judge, you are automatically made the president of this little club." Wilton turned to his right, offering his hand to Doug, who stood there, with the drink in one hand, sipping away at it. The handshake offer was taken up by his fellow officer, who heartily shook it. "Mighty odd time for all of this to be happening, though." "You think so? Judging from the way I have both the state police and the federal agency police looking down on me and poking around my town, it was perfect timing. Reportedly, some investigation was going on by them into our terrible associate, Judge DePercy. So, perfect or not timing, we will find out." "I hadn't heard that, no. I heard the whole rumors about how bad the judge was. But an investigation by those big old boys up in the Capitol? Yeah, that's not good." "Oh, you'll have the big boys coming around soon enough for you and your lot. They don't seem happy that things have happened down here." Doug nodded, and the two went to the long table that stretched out towards a balcony that looked down on the dancers below. They were on the end far from seeing things, but Wilton didn't mind one bit. The table consisted of 5 local mayors and 5 local sheriffs, minus the mayor yet to come and Bartley. They soon arrived and took their seats. "I, Mac Harrod of the town of Johnsburg, call the meeting into session. We are here to see to who should be the next judge who presides over the matters in our district, in our little district. Who wishes to be nominated, please raise your hand." Carroll, Bartley, and Wilton all raised their hands as the group looked about to see who wanted the job. 3 people, I see then. Well, this means we'll probably need some more meetings about who to put forward, since it is a contested vote. This meeting was just to see who was interested, I guess, and who we would nominate for the upcoming election. "Psh, our election is merely a formality that the state keeps pushing. Our organization has decided who gets the job for close to 100 years now." Yes, Sheriff Hart, we do. We do not do it for ourselves, though, but to keep up appearances, since everyone likes to get mad at the slightest thing lately, so there is no need to draw any more attention to ourselves, wouldn't you say? As for the judge himself, what else was known about the situation that he got himself into? There was a moment of silence, and then Sheriff Wilton slowly rose to his feet and doffed his cap. "I'm leading the case on that. If it appears that he had arranged things with the local hospital and the collection agency to put people into debt, he'd get money, we believe, for ruling in the debt company's favor and the hospital's favor of collecting money." There was a few murmurs, but no surprised looks on anyone's face. "As for the crime itself, the murder, we don't know much. A lone person traveled reportedly across the country, went to the judge's office, and shooting up the place as best that we can tell, it was on fire by the time the police arrived, and we saved what we could. That did not include the bodies of the judge or the shooter. It should also be pointed out that the state cops are looking into the matters as well as the government ones." He was quiet as he sat back down, and all eyes stared at him and did not turn away. Wilton looked back at them and with ease, meeting each of their gazes until they decided it was enough, that they'd heard enough. Alrighty. Well, this is not good news, and this means further meetings in places like this are banned. We do not want to draw attention to ourselves, so from now on it is only official government stuff, boys and girls of the mayors and sheriffs around here. No attention is to be drawn to our little organization. Understood? There were nods yes to this all around. And since that is the case, I think we should break this meeting early. No further discussions. If you wish to campaign for yourself to be the next judge, please do so, but not loudly to anyone of any importance. No one spoke, but the group began getting up and leaving, slowly, one by one. Bartley and Carol were one of the last ones around, and Wilton judged when it was his turn to leave. The two seemed to be nearer to one another, talking in whispers about something. Never a good sign when those two were working together and when they were supposed to be competing against one another. He retrieved his gun from security and went out to the parking lot. Wilton leaned against his car, waiting for the mayor, Carol, to come out. They would need to talk, and here was better than in town. A few minutes slipped by before she came storming her way out, stuffing a pistol into her purse, and then, once outside, slowed down to try and look government regal. This lasted all of a few seconds until she spotted Wilton and shook her head as she went towards her car. Mayor? What do you want? Is something bothering you about how I run our town? I figured you want to know the things that happen in your incorporated area, including the bayou. But you have been oddly off-putting any time I try to call you and tell you any news, ma'am. My job only involves being told about certain events. I do not need to be in the day-to-day investigation of crimes, though it might help me if I knew everything that was going on. Right, only when it affects you personally, ma'am, and when people might not vote your way. Still, I need you to know that people are not going to come around and ask questions about everything that's going on. Her mood darkened as her eyes flashed in anger. It's your job to stop questions, sir. It's my job to make sure crimes are investigated after they've been committed. If no one tells me that the judge is up to no good, I can't do anything about it. Likewise, if no one in town complains about lost votes, can't investigate that either. Do not disturb the balance of matters, Mr. Wilton, and do your job. Oh, I will. I am doing my job, ma'am. Matters always take interesting twists and turns, but you need to be aware once outside sources come looking into matters, it won't be a simple snap of my fingers to make it all go away. Understood? She was not pleased and seemed to want to say something more, but a glance around the place where a few customers were coming in gave her some other thoughts, and she stormed fully off towards her car. I'll be in touch with more information about the investigation and who might be looking into our dear mayor. We can't have you not involved in something so big in our town. Her pace increased towards her car as the patrons looked over, and then headed for the doorway into Gloves Grove. He merely smiled at the retreating sight, knowing that he had at least annoyed her. With that accomplished, he went to get into his car. The need for food called Wilton as he got back into town. He found the local diner right off the highway, not the greatest of places to eat, but it was one of the few places. It also operated 23 hours a day, thanks to the location near the highway. It was a greasy spot where things were served as a level of sludge food and drink that tended to stick around for far too long. Wilton went up to the counter and sat down in the unbusy diner for the evening hour. The waitress, Sammy, came over with a pot of coffee that looked more like molasses than coffee inside its clear see-through container. A fact that shouldn't be possible since they changed the stuff every couple of hours. Yet, here it was. Sheriff, you would not believe how busy we have had it lately. Cops and government people? How'd you guess? Sammy, you aren't stupid as you pretend to be, and you hear more news than most people in this town since you work here. People love to gossip. I doubt the news about the judge has passed you by and the attention it has drawn. She offered a smile as she fetched a coffee cup and poured some warm, sludgy coffee into it. "You know this place all too well, Sheriff. Would you like the usual, or will it be something different this time?" "I will stick with what I know. You do well, thank you. But once you've given the cook my order and my compliments on surviving another day here, please do come back and have a nice chat with me. I'd like to catch up on things." "Why, whatever for, sir?" "Well, it is fairly obvious, Sammy, that cops like to talk and compare notes when they feel safe. And despite the greasiness of this place is as safe as any, and you just happen to be listening nearby when you work here, as do most of the waitresses." Her smile widened. She went off to put in the order, and he took the moment to settle into his seat and really look around. It was mostly empty, and he hoped it would stay that way. If any of the government cops or state ones came by, it would make for an awkward conversation to have with his waitress friend. There was only the regular few people, though, who seemed more interested in themselves than anyone else. A minute passed before she came back, sans coffee pot. "So what are you looking to learn, Mr. Wilton?" "If you could run down what the cops were saying about the judge and the cases he was involved in, that would be appreciated." She paused to think about this and leaned into the counter, giving a bit of a flash of her bosom. Wilton found himself looking there and then looked into her eye, trying to figure out what she was doing. Sammy pretended not to notice, as she then looked to the ceiling in her quest for knowledge. She didn't stay like this for long, though, meeting his gaze after a few seconds. "Most of what I know is about how the judge was under investigation for bribery and accepting payments for rulings or something like that." "This coming from the big government cops?" "And the state one." The news did not please Wilton, who wanted to frown but did his best to cover his mouth with his hand. If everyone knew about this, then why hadn't they moved in sooner? It was a good thing that things had ended before those two parties moved in on the judge. That really would have brought the press down on the area and looking into every single thing they'd ever done. But the judge dying in a fire, that wasn't a big deal aside from locally, although he was murdered by a man from out of town, so somehow the agents had wound up here, now looking into things. "Say, Sheriff, who is going to take over for the judge? I heard there are quite a few cases still in the court system. My brother, for example, has a case from a collection agency seeking payments from him." "Is it a collection agency sent by the hospital, or just a collection agency, or what's going on there?" "Yeah, I think it's a collection agency. We collect for you, or something like that." "Yeah, well, I think it'll probably be delayed until a new judge gets set in, unless they go over a couple of towns and use another judge, or appoint a temporary one, I suppose. The collection agency probably will request the delay, or at least request a temporary judge gets sent in so that they can clear things out. They want things to go their way, after all. They want to make sure that it's their man, probably. And so, I don't know. We'll find out, I guess, once they associate a new judge with things." She nodded, a bit doubtful. "There's one other thing." "Well, please tell me." "The government ones said they were looking at others connected to Percy, but didn't say who, just that they were locals." He nodded as a bell rang from the kitchen, signaling that food was ready. She went off to fetch it as he thought this over, though Sammy was soon back with a plate of pasta and left him to his meal. After dinner, Wilton got back into his car and drove through the streets. He was keeping an eye out for crime, but more so headed to the local home of the CEO of the collection agency. Loxie was the last name, and they lived up in a big hill in the private community area. It was hard not to miss the sudden change in atmosphere from the back small road of houses and trailer parks to the decent-looking home, and then finally one found themselves around bigger and bigger houses, all of which didn't have tax on them from what he knew. He shook his head at the sight and sighed to himself. If only his pay was nice enough to afford something like these places, life would be a bit nicer to deal with. The road to the upper section, where the upper crust kept themselves tucked away, appeared, and he turned onto it. He couldn't get far onto the road, though, as a security gate blocked the road up ahead. Wilton pulled up to it and saw the guard inside, and glanced out, waved him through, and as the gates quietly glided to the side to let him in. The drive to the house where Loxley lived was an easy one, though it took a little time. Wilton soon found the mansion of a house, a sprawled-out place that was hard to see thanks to the amount of planted trees that blocked the views to it. He pulled the car up to the gate where the little call box was and pressed the button here. A minute passed before there was a buzzing noise and the speaker in the box. "Yes, who is it who wishes to meet with Mr. and Miss Loxley?" "Sheriff Wilton to see either of them if they are home, please." "What is the meeting about?" "Oh, the usual nonsense matters that they would wish would remain private and unheard by listeners." "Only the lady is home, if that is okay with you, sir." "I'm not a sexist person, Mr. Butler. I'll meet with whoever is willing to meet. You need to get your head out of the 1960s. "Yes, I will work on that, I guess." There was a loud buzz, and the gates before him swung open to the driveway of the house. He drove through when they had fully opened, the house soon coming into sight. A minute later he pulled up to the end of the driveway and to the front of this house. The butler stood there in front of the door looking at him from the flight of stairs that led up to the front deck and door in. Clambering out of his vehicle, Wilton slowly came about and began going up the stairs until he was in front of the butler. "Good evening, sir." "Nice to see you, Butler Rodney. You said the lady was in?" "Yes, sir. She has been informed of your arrival, and seems eager to know what this is about." "And suddenly my eagerness to talk to her has plummeted to near nothingness. Did she mention why she was eager?" "I am but a butler, sir. What my employer tells me remains with me. But she seems to want to know what you want to talk to her about." "As you wish, sir. I'll lead your way to your boss if you would be so kind." With a bow, the butler swept them inside the mansion. He was taken to the billiard room where Miss Loxley was playing a game on the billiard table. She moved about with deftness with a cue in hand as she approached him. He offered his hand, which she took limply. The black dress she wore flowed all the way down, as if it were a full gown. She was still young, and it showed with how she looked at him, judging his own movements. "Well, dear Sheriff, what is it you've come all the way out here to talk to me about?" "Your husband and you are probably under an investigation from higher local authorities." "In what regards are you talking about?" "You'll deal with the judge in the hospital, most likely." "I wasn't personally told this information. It came to me second-hand." Having taken her hand away, she studied him carefully. It was not a look of one who trusted what he was saying. She moved back towards the gaming table, but kept her eyes on him as she went. "I see. And you expect me to say something to the effects of—" He shrugged at her. There wasn't an expectation of anything to that. He did hope she would say something, though. "I will tell my husband, Derek, when he gets home, that matters are serious. Now, is there something else, or do I get to enjoy my little game in peace once again?" You may also want to know who is standing up for the potential replacement of the judge." This made her pause as she leaned over the table to take a shot. "Yes, that would be good information to have. We love to know who to support in matters of making this fair area a better place to live." "Mayor Carroll, the sheriff barley from 2 towns over, and then there is myself standing for the job." "I see. Interesting that so many people want it. Why are you after it?" "Things need cleaning up here, ma'am." The top of her dress was not as revealing as, say, Sammy's, but it still cut fine figure, and he tried to keep looking her in the eyes. There was some curiosity to her as she was trying to figure out what he meant and if it would be good or bad for them. Their eyes met, and they steadily stared at one another. "And what needs cleaning up?" "What you and your husband are planning in regards to a new judge. I need to know what's going on. Are you meeting with this new potential judge and to reach a new agreement or something, or are you holding off until the other police are looking the other way? She stood up straight and moved towards a nearby table where Q rack stood. It also happened to be near a little table with some alcohol on it. She poured a drink for herself before turning back to him. How much do you know about this matter? A little more than the average citizen of the town, plus whatever slips out from time to time from our former judge, who I talk to from time to time. So nothing at all, then. Good. Keep it that way. My husband will be in contact with you in regards to any further information should we feel it need to tell you anything. And/or you turn up with a search warrant. Choose wisely. You could talk and this would be over rather quickly. I have nothing to say to you and any other agency who claims to be investigating us for alleged crimes. I know, I'm smarter than that. Any further contact will be considered harassment and we will complain to the governor. And your lawyers as well, of course. Yes, that's how things work. Well, I'll be back around here with Warren, as will the other police officers, the agency, the state, and everyone else who's interested. They probably know more than I do about all of this anyway, so good luck with that. It's only a matter of time before you have to spend time talking to them. We know, all right. We don't have to say anything at all, unless there is a subpoena and a warrant. Nothing, of course, is going to slip by you and your lawyers, whoever you pay to handle these high expenses this will cost. And it's not going to be pretty. It'll be easier to talk. One last thing, though, before I go, since you won't do that. I wanted to warn you that Judge DePercy was murdered. That means that someone knew more than they're letting on. Maybe it was you and your husband, or maybe someone from your collection agency. You'll need to keep an ear and an eye out for someone who perhaps doesn't like you either. Like you. I have no feelings one way or another about you, Miss Christie Loxley. I'm just here to see what you would tell me or won't tell me. Have a good night. With all that said, and a wave of his hand, he headed for the door and disappeared. Wilton would drive home after that, taking the slow roads to keep things interesting and to waste a bit of time. Home, while nice, it was a place that was for sleep and little else. The less time spent there, the better. Wilton pulled onto his road and noticed the strange car parked nearby his house. It was dark, unmarked, which to him yelped state police about it. All he could do was sigh as he pulled up his driveway. It was a short one, basically fit only his car, as it was right up against his house. Wilton got out of his car and looked over to the unmarked one. The door to it was open, so he headed over to it as a female stepped out and walked towards him. She held her hand out. Good evening, Sheriff. Good evening. Is there a reason the state police are hanging around my home? She smiled, seemingly amused by his observation as he took her hand and shook it. I'm Detective Helen Bryan of one of the state officers looking into matters, but not the ones involving the judge's death. No. I am looking into the matters of misuse of power, fraud, and anything else we might come up with to charge him. I see, and you needed to talk to me to see what I knew about the matter? She nodded her head yes. Very well then, I've only heard the story. No official complaints or reports on what was going on with him. All I heard was rumors, and while they were compelling to look into, my officers were busy trying to chase down a local smuggler who was causing headaches for us. I had no resources if there were any complaints. I see, and the fact that the judge was your half-brother? You didn't attempt to talk to him about this matter? Ex-half-brother. My ex-wife's brother, not my brother, and I was divorced from that witch when he came back to town, so we're not really related. So no communication between you two then, that's what you're saying? I did not say that. The communications we had were purely professional and involved only active cases. Anything that was rumored about him remained quiet because one doesn't tip off people that they're investigating. And what is your connection with the Loxley family? I know of them. I don't know them personally, but I have talked to them. They don't much like me since I'm a police officer. Other than that, once again, it's all rumors about their involvement with matters, but no evidence and not enough cops to go around investigating, just rumors. He kept a careful watch on her face to see if she was buying what he was saying. So far, it looked like that might be the case. Please be aware then, Sheriff Wilton, that you may be served a subpoena to get all of this on record. Getting all your ducks in a row, then. Perhaps, Mr. Wilton, perhaps. Thank you, then. Before you do leave, you wouldn't happen to be the one working with the government cops, would you? They have a name, sir. Yeah, but we don't like cops like them, and they don't like us, so we all keep things informal unless we're around them. There are agents we are talking with constantly about matters, including this one. As for names, I'm sure you will find them coming knocking on your door soon enough. Good night. With a wave of her hand, she departed back to her car. He did not return the wave and instead headed for his front door. Exhausted and tired, Wilton got into the house and slammed his front door shut. Too much had been happening lately, and it was all coming down around him. He went over to his couch and fell onto it, ignoring all around him for a minute, as he closed his eyes and relaxed. The sound of footsteps made him open his eyes again and look over at his girlfriend and her relaxed clothing of sweat. Anything wrong, honey? Yes, everything lately is wrong. What you mean? The town is crawling with cops because the stupid judge who was all too flashy and wanted money. Oh, is that why there's so many people out on our bayou hills lately? You took the cops out to the judge's place? It's my job, hon. I'm a tour guide for the airport, and you know the quickest way around the water to get to the judge's place. Sigh, I didn't mean to imply or make you angry with me. The living room window suddenly smashed into pieces with something flying in. Wilton glanced over, surprised, and trying to figure out what it was, and then decided to try and duck and avoid anything that was happening. End of part 2 of A Judge, a Jury, and a Sheriff. Thank you for listening.